Everything from the building of the Giza pyramids to the finding of contemporary yachts and helicopters written in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. The mysteries of the land of Egypt are so many that they astound people. One of the earliest cities in ancient Egypt is called Abydos, and it is located 550 km from Cairo. There is nothing but sand as far as you can see on one side, where the Nile River flows for 11 kilometers. An odd and bizarre sculpture erupted from the sand in 1988 as a result of a strong wind. It was a severely decayed wooden structure, severely eaten away by termites. In 2000, an archaeological team started working here to find the truth, because even a tiny error could cause the structure to be damaged. This excavation has to be done very carefully. What sprang up out of the sand was not a regular structure, but a boat that measured 70 feet in length. In the middle of the desert, why was there only one boat? The search for answers to solve the mystery was still ongoing. Therefore, the situation was not yet resolved. It was discovered that the boats buried side by side in the desert numbered 14, not just 1 or 2. Welcome to the new video again. We're unable to fully remove these rundown vessels from the sand. For if they did, they feared these boats would break and an enormous mystery would remain unsolved. They could only conclude that the boats were 5,000 years old with the aid of a few wood samples. That is 500 years older than the pyramids of Giza. But this was not enough to solve the puzzle in a single solution. After some time, researchers were able to generate a 3D model of all of it, without having to touch it thanks to the most recent sonar scanning equipment. This is how the 3D model that was produced following scanning appears. As far as human history goes, this is the oldest fleet ever. Boats, measuring 60 to 70 feet, that appear to have been meticulously arranged parallel to one another. The first thing that springs to mind while looking at the place where these boats are stationed is if this was formerly the bank of the Nile River. Experts swiftly ruled out this idea, considering that these boats would have been in an unstable position if they had floated to the river's bank. They appear to have been purposefully parked here because they are parallel to one another. In addition, the archaeologist examined the surrounding area in great detail. However, there was no indication that the Nile River once flowed through this area. So, who was the owner of these boats? And why were they carried to the desert if they did not come here by flowing in the river? When the boat structures were rebuilt using 3D graphics, a hint was discovered. These were not your typical boats. Instead, they were rowing boats that a group of 30 people used oars to propel, much like the raft boats of today. If we look attentively at their design, we can see that these boats were painstakingly made by expertly tying ropes between wooden boards. According to archaeologists, these boats seem very different and sophisticated from those built in that age. These boats had their wooden planks cut at a precise angle and positioned from the interior. Furthermore, it appears that their construction was done in a way that would improve their visual attractiveness. Boats were exclusive to the pharaoh, the ancient Egyptian pharaoh, who was the sole owner of such vessels. Modern boats of the era were dumped in the desert like trash. Only the king had the authority to do so. Why were they held in the desert, though, is the mystery that remains. Egyptologists started exploring the surroundings to try and solve the riddle of the Abydos boats. The location of this fleet's grave is adjacent to a sizable, dilapidated mud brick building. According to experts, this enormous building seems to be an ancient Egyptian site of worship, where their pharaoh was formerly worshipped as their deity. Because clay jars that were formerly used to pour wine and food have been discovered here, many festivities likely took place here. These boats' carbon dating revealed that their creation occurred in the same time frame as the construction of the 14 other boats. Egyptologists are now certain that there must be a connection between this construction and the 14 boats. Upon closer examination of these boats, a hint was discovered that would prove to be a breakthrough in this discovery. There were also mud bricks positioned all around the boats. The brick wall was constructed with the boat's curve in mind, like they were designed specifically for boats. Similar mud bricks were discovered beneath the boats in addition to these walls on their sides. Now, given the presence of bricks on 3 sides, it is quite possible that additional bricks were added to the tops of the boats. Things eventually fell and were covered over. When bricks were added to the upper portion of the boats, they began to display a scene similar to this one thanks to 3D graphics. These were little more than boat coffins. Yes, these boats were positioned inside these coffins 5,000 years ago with the same solemnity and splendor as mummies. For aesthetic purposes, a white limestone plaster was placed on top of them. They would seem to gleam from a distance in the desert when the sun dropped on them. Let us inform you that the top layer of the pyramids was also covered in the same kind of white plaster when they were first constructed. Multiple artifacts discovered by archaeologists suggest that white limestone plaster was employed as a decorative material by the ancient Egyptians. The pyramids would glisten like jewels in the desert when limestone plaster was applied. After a long period of time, archaeologists have mostly solved the mystery surrounding the Abydos boats. It had been shown that these vessels had not arrived by way of the Nile River floating. They were kept in mud brick coffins, as evidenced by their sophisticated design, which belonged to an ancient Egyptian ruler. The last question: why were the boats placed inside coffins? They were interred in the tomb of an Egyptian king, which is located in the desert only 1.5 kilometers from here. The startling truth is that this tomb was built during the same period as the boats and other vessels discovered within the house of worship. Not only was the mummy of the pharaoh buried in this tomb, but also, on the day of the king's death, the pharaoh's family members were interred in these little boxes that you are currently viewing. Yes, all the people he loved most had decided to pass away with their god, their pharaoh, and depart from this world in observance of the king's honor. They held that the king should be buried with all of his possessions, including his attendants, to facilitate his transition into the afterlife. To aid the same king in his afterlife, the boats were likewise magnificently positioned inside the coffins. Later Egyptian pharaohs' tombs have also been found to follow this custom. The majority of Egyptian pharaohs' tombs have been looted, and many more are likely lying hidden in the sand. King Tutankhamun's tomb was found several feet below the surface in the Valley of the Kings in 1922, which, for some reason, managed to elude the plunderers. All of the king's possessions, including his treasure, were present and undamaged. Similar to the Abydos boats, models of 35 boats were also discovered in this trove, and may be buried with the monarch to aid in his transition to the afterlife. I hope you enjoy the video. See you in the next awesome video.